Welcome everybody to Effective Networking with Real People and Why It Matters. And I'm really happy that we have such a strong interest in this particular topic. It was just wonderful to see all of the registrations pouring in, and we have a great attendance on this webinar. So welcome. Thank you so much for joining me today on the webinar, and I hope you get a lot of really useful information out of it. We tried to make it as value-packed as we could. And we also have some special gifts for everybody, so that at the end you get some little downloads that you can use and put into practice right away. So here is me, and I am the CEO of Shift Management, and Shift Management is my company, and I have a wonderful team that works with me to support all of the virtual work that we do. We do supervisory leadership training for industry, lead hand supervisors, and then we do management training and business training for upper level management. And then we do a lot of workplace learning, leadership and intercultural development for the workplace. And that's online courses and online events like webinars. And we do free webinars every month as a special service to people who are from the outside of the country and have settled in Canada and are now looking for work in their field and need a few tips on getting into the Canadian workplace culture. And then we also do webinars that are for best practices for employers so that they can be on a continuous improvement journey themselves. So let's get started with the webinar. And I'm going to talk about networking. That's why you're here. And I'll be asking you some questions as we go along too. So you will have some opportunities to type questions into the chat box. And any time that you have a great idea that you want to share or you have a question you want to ask, just go ahead and type it in. I will be watching the chat box, and I will try to respond to them throughout so that we can get people's questions answered, because sometimes you come with a very specific question and it's really frustrating when the presenter doesn't answer it, and I don't want you to experience that frustration. So feel free to type your questions or your comments in whenever you feel like it. So why networking matters in Canada is that is really how you build up your professional career. And you don't stop networking once you get a job. You need to continue networking to build your professional groups and networks so you can use that professional network to get answers to questions, and they can use you. And that is generally how people find inside work. And I often use the example of my e-learning partner, Stella Lee, who is from Hong Kong. And she does a lot of virtual networking as well as in-person networking. And she rarely has to look for work because people offer her jobs all the time. And they do that because she answers questions that they have. And in LinkedIn groups and just generally when she attends events, and people realize she has expertise and they come to her. So that's a lovely position to be in. And that is how I met her too, and that's how she came to be one of my business partners. So also your network is your safety net. So if you haven't developed a network, you have nowhere to go if you lose your job. And this has been exactly the problem of a lot of people in the oil and gas industry, for example. So they have had a job and they thought, oh, I'm good, oil and gas is going to be here forever, and it wasn't, and now they have no place to go. So I recently just heard on the news today that one person who's an oil and gas worker is walking across Canada to demonstrate that he is upset with the fact that oil and gas workers cannot find work right now. When in fact, if he worked to develop his network, he would probably be better off than if he were walking across Canada. Although he may develop a network from walking across Canada. We'll have to watch it and see. People tend to promote and refer people they know. So if you have a network, you have a bunch of people who know you, and they will refer you, and you can refer them. And I just finished meeting with an international student right now today. She just left 5 minutes ago, and she asked me if I had any connections in the food processing and restaurant management business. And in fact, I have 10. And so I'm connecting her to all of those people. So if you want to get work, you need to network. And so we're going to talk about the different ways that you can network depending on your personality style and whether you're comfortable networking with real people or not. So you can network with real people in real events, and you can also network virtually with people. And both of them work well. Today we're just going to talk about working with real people, but I have a also excellent presentation which I will invite you to if you're interested later. And that virtual presentation is about how to connect virtually with people. And many people connect virtually. So we can use both of those, and the best combination, of course, is to do both. But today we're going to talk about working with real people in formal and informal situations. So you might find people just wherever you happen to be. And in Canadian culture, people tend not to speak really openly at bus stops or in lineups, but it's not impossible to do, and when you do it, often others feel quite happy and start responding to you. I do this all the time. So if I'm in a lineup, I try to find something that I can make a joke about or that I can comment on, or I say something like, wow, this lineup seems pretty long. Have you been standing here for long? And then before you know it, you've got a conversation going and things start to heat up, and sometimes it turns into a networking opportunity. And sometimes it just gives you practice for networking with people. So that's the informal one. But there are also formal networking opportunities. And when you're at a formal networking opportunity, you have to follow the right protocol. Because if you don't, you might be in a situation where people will not consider you, or they might even speak poorly of you to potential employers. And you don't want that to happen. So I'm going to give you a few tips for how to avoid that. How does it sound so far? Does it sound like something you think would be useful? If you think it would be useful, type yes into the chat box so I know I'm on the right track. Okay. Yes, absolutely. Yes, yes. Everybody's saying yes. All right, good. I'm happy about that. So let's look at how not to network. I have a little video clip to show you too about how not to network, which I think could be quite useful. So when people meet, people can be quite desperate for looking for work. And when they're trying to find work, that feeling of desperation is very uncomfortable for the other person. So probably you've had this experience. I know I've had this experience. So here's a similar experience. Somebody likes you, and they really want to have a relationship with you romantically, but you are not really, you've just met them, and you're not even sure if you're interested in that person, but they're coming on strong to you, and you're just like, ooh, get away from me, right? That's how people feel when you come on strong and say, I need a job, are you hiring? That's just, it's too strong, too soon, too fast. And another thing that people often do when they meet someone in a networking situation, formal or informal, is they go, oh, let me tell you about my skills and my expertise, and they go on, and it gets to be too much because you haven't asked anything about the other person. Or they start name dropping, and they go, oh, I know this person, and I know this person, and, you know, and I can refer you to that person, or do you have contact information for this person? And it gets, people get like, why are you talking to me if you already know all these people? Or they ask right away if they can give you your resume. And you know what? Those resumes are just going to go in the garbage because you haven't established a connection with them yet. And then here's the one that I hate the most, and this is the one that is guaranteed to lose you any job or network opportunity. Say, you know what? I can do anything. Just give me a chance. That, for sure, is not going to get you any work at all in Canada. It may work somewhere else, but I know for sure that it does not work in Canada. So I'm going to show you a little video clip right now about a very bad networking experience and what went wrong with this particular person.
I'm so glad to meet you.
I'm happy it worked out. This is Sonia.
I wanted to show you my skills and experience. Here is my resume.
Well, maybe after dinner?
Sure, I can wait.
So, where did you two meet?
She presented at the company I used to work for, and I thought, hey, I could do that. So that's why I'm here. I remember everything you said. Excuse me, ladies.
I remember her. She left after the first training session.
You can see I have lots of credentials. I look forward to hearing from you.
Sure. Well, I'll let you know if anything comes up.
That was a good example of what not to do. And the reason that it didn't work was because the woman who was interested in networking wasn't using the opportunity appropriately. And so I'm just going to type a quick little message in here to somebody who asked me a question. So what was wrong with it is that they were at a dinner meeting, which was an informal meeting. And the woman who wanted to to take advantage of the networking opportunity, jumped right in and started talking about her skills, about her opportunities, and she's having a bunch of issues. So this woman was at the supper table, and she didn't do any small talk. And when the other woman said, "How did you two meet?" she right away jumped in and said, "Oh, you know what? I was at this workshop, and I thought, you know what, I could do the same thing that this woman was doing. I did the same thing as her, so I thought I should come in and offer my services." So first off, that's a little bit insulting because she's already saying she can do your job, and so that's kind of a problem. And she didn't try to connect with the other people that were there. And then right away she started saying about everything, how everything was better because she could do it. And so the whole thing went wrong. And there's some general principles about why that didn't work. Networking is indirect. Even if you're speaking directly to somebody at a networking event, networking is still indirect. And it's important to remember that fundamental principle. It's about relationships. That's the second fundamental principle. So you need to build relationships in order to network effectively. So it's like a dialogue. It's like a conversation. If you start and do your thing and don't pay attention to the other person, people don't like that. It doesn't feel like a relationship. It doesn't feel like a conversation. So the way to do networking correctly now is going to be the next 10 slides or so. Here's some important things to remember. Now, I am going to give you this PowerPoint deck, and also you'll get a link to the recording afterwards, and you're going to get some gifts, which I'll tell you about later. So you'll get lots of stuff to help you with your networking. But to be starting correctly with networking in either formal or informal in-person events, you want to first start about asking the other person things about themselves. You can say, "Tell me about yourself," or "How are you enjoying the event?" or "What brought you here today?" or "Gee, we just heard something interesting. What did you think about that?" Start with something indirect and that's not personal, that just lets people say something about themselves. If you get the other person to speak, that is very helpful. So, and that's fundamental principle number 3 for networking. Networking is not about you, although you may think it is. It's actually not. It's about the other people and how they feel. And if they feel warm towards you, you have made a good networking connection. And if they feel like they just want to get away from you, you haven't made a good networking connection. So, I'm going to give you a few strategies for how to make this work. And it's based on the idea of pulling and pushing. And every country has its own set of pull and push strategies. If you are coming from a country outside of Canada, you do not know the pull and push strategies that work for Canadians. And if Canadians go to your country, they will not know the pull and push strategies that work for your country. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about how this works. In Canada, you start with pull questions. Now, there are people who don't, and those people are not going to get results. But generally speaking, the correct protocol is to ask probing questions that bring the other person to you. That's like pulling them towards you. So you say, "Oh, that's interesting. Tell me more." Or, "How did you do that? Then what happened? Do you know anyone else who had that experience?" All this, you're asking them questions to draw them in and get them to tell you more. That's the very first thing you do in Canada. Now, you may say, "Oh, my name is," and so I'd say, "Okay, my name is Marie Gervais, and I'm the owner of Shift Management." And so, yeah, I might say that. But then I would go in, "So tell me about yourself." I would hardly say anything about me. And if by the time they start to think, "Oh, what does Shift Management do?" I would have already asked them 3 or 4 questions about themselves. Always think about how you can pull people towards you. Once you've done that, then you need to respond, because it feels kind of shady if you don't respond. So if you just keep asking questions and then you never answer anything, people start to get suspicious. They're going, "Why do they want all this information from me, and how are they going to use it?" So once you've asked a few questions, I'd say about 3. Once you've asked about 3 questions and you know something about the other person, you're starting to get a feel for them, then you start to respond. When you respond, that's a push technique. So you'll go, "You know what? I had an experience just like that." And you tell them the story. Or, "You know what? When I was working at this place, this is what I did. It's kind of the same as what you did, or it's very different from what you did." So you're giving some context about yourself. And what you're trying to do is create a sense of familiarity, because you are two people who are different from each other. And difference is good for curiosity, but it's similarity that creates friendships. And so you want to try and find out what you've got in common, and what could be something that you would both like. Then you do give your pitch. And for this, you need to be well prepared. So you're going to need to have a couple of good comebacks that are interesting. The most interesting pitch I ever heard was from a man. I was at a networking event, and he said, I do radical surgery on sick machines. And I was so interested. I said, whoa, what kind of surgery do you do? How sick are these machines? And then he said, some people call that heavy-duty machine mechanic. And so it was really interesting. And then he had me hooked. I was so interested in hearing about his job. People have also said things like, oh, my specialty is, and then instead of saying, oh, well, you know, I'm an engineer. I'm an engineer is not very interesting. But saying my specialty is, and then you say something that you do as an engineer that is your specialty, that's really interesting. Or you say, my specialty is recognizing market trends and patterns. And here's one I found recently. I found that the most important trend is collaboration. It's a worldwide epidemic. It's spreading all across the world. So, you know, like, that's interesting, and then people will want to know more. So your pitch, your push at this point, is something that grabs the attention of the other person. Now, let's say you're a student and you don't have that much or any work experience. Talk about a school project that you really loved, something that you did really well on, something that you gained a certain amount of expertise in. Say, I did a project for one of my courses and it was this. And when you talk about that, everybody's going to be interested. So think about something that's going to hook the other person in. And once you've got that person hooked, then they are ready to hear you. They feel you have a relationship, you showed you're interested in them, you said a little bit about yourself, and it was said in such a way that they were really interested in finding out more. They are now ready to listen. That's when you talk about yourself. But again, you don't want to go on for too long, because otherwise then people will get, they'll have some issues. So once you've gotten to that point where you've had a chance to say something about yourself, so that's when you can talk a little bit longer, 3 to 5 sentences about what you do. Then you want to try and, you have a regular conversation, and then you reach the end. Now this could be 5, 10 minutes, it could be a half an hour, sort of depending on how long you go. When you get to the end, you do something to pull the person back towards you again. You say, I really enjoyed our conversation, or I enjoyed speaking with you. So something like that makes people feel valued. And then, after that, you say, may I offer you my business card? So again, that's another pull. Instead of saying, here's my business card, you go, may I offer you my business card? Or you might say, may I have your business card? So you ask the other person for that, and you find a way to connect with that person. That is really important because it seals the relationship. This is the basic networking protocol in Canada, and that's what's going to get you to the next step. And so the reason it's important is because people refer, hire, and promote people they like most of the time. So if you can get into the most of the time, beyond somebody's like list, then they are likely to want to refer, hire, or promote you. They may not hire you directly, and that's an important thing to remember about networking too. Usually it's the cool relationship that hires you. So not the really warm one, but the cool one. And that is usually your second or third connection through somebody. But people also hire people who provoke them. And I'm just going to give you one little tip about this one. If you say something that challenges the other person, they are more likely to hire you than if you just don't stand out at all. So one way you can get people to be part of your network is because they like you and they want to connect with you. Another way is if you challenge them. And the challenge would be something like, I'm not sure I believe what you just said. Where did you get that from? And that may sound rude. I mean, you can find your own way of saying it. But challenging people often means that they remember you. And an interesting thing about promotions is that most men who challenge their superiors get promotions. Now, women who challenge their superiors don't necessarily get promotions. So if you are a woman, I would not suggest that you do this without another webinar, which I do, which has to do with gender differences. But if you are a man and you're already hired and you want to move up, a challenge is more likely to get you a promotion than just being friendly. Now, that's something to keep in mind. So when you're networking, generally, you attract more flies with honey than vinegar. So you want people to like you and to have a good relationship with you. But also, sometimes you want to challenge them. And if you challenge them a little bit, then it could work. So now Kofi has his hand raised. Now, Kofi, if you have a question, please type it into the chat box, and I would be happy to answer it for you, okay? So now, let's go to this piece. Once you have sealed the deal, you're now at close to the end. You may think you're at the end, but you're not at the end. So once you've exchanged business cards and you feel like you've sealed the relationship, what you want to do is you want to make an offer of service. Now, most people, when they hear that, they think, this is ridiculous. Why are they telling me to do that? I'm trying to get a job. They should be offering something to me. Actually, it's the other way around. The person who can offer the service has the power. So, you know, if I can fix your car, I have the power because your car is broken, right? So the service can be, can I send you an article about that? Or do you ever have greeter events or events where you need a greeter where I could come and volunteer? It's when you offer to do something for the other person, first off, they like it. Secondly, you form another connection. And thirdly, it shows that you have something valuable to offer, and it raises you in their eyes. So your estimation goes up in the other person's eyes because you are offering a service. So although it is a pull technique because you're offering a service, it's actually a push in disguise because you are showing you have expertise and capacity and skills and that you are willing to use them to help the other person. So that's the sixth fundamental principle. You have skills and you have resources, and when you offer them, people see right away that they have them. They have them there. And I'm just going to tell you a little secret about how I do most of my hiring in my company. I frequently put out volunteer requests. And when people volunteer, I hire from my volunteer bank. And I'll tell you why. Because the people who volunteer are always the best workers. The ones who are willing to do something for you and do a good job because they care about it are the people who are going to do just as good a job, if not better, when they're being paid and they still care about it. So this is why it's important to think about your networking opportunity as something where you have something to offer, not where you are seeking something. So here's Kofi's question. He says, these ideas of networking are fantastic, but I wonder, don't you think expertise and ability to accomplish a task must take precedence over such niceties? No, Kofi. In fact, I'm sorry, it really is a no, because your expertise does not convince anybody anything. In Canada, relationship is number one. If you haven't established a relationship with them, they don't care what expertise you have. Everything in Canada starts with first relationship, then expertise. So you have to remember that. It's really important. If you don't follow this protocol, you will just end up hitting your head against a brick wall. Nobody's going to be interested in hiring you. I can tell you that right away. So now let's go to the call to action. So now you've finished all of this. You just offered a service. You've sealed the deal. And now you go to the action call, because if you don't ask, you may not have any results. So this is where you might say, you know, do you know anyone who is looking for somebody who has an interest in mechanical engineering? Or do you know anyone who's looking for a manager? Or do you know anyone who's looking for expertise, the kind of expertise that you know I do? You can also ask, can you connect me to somebody who might be able to help out? So, or could you give me a virtual introduction to that person you mentioned? So you can also ask them directly for a coffee meeting. So all of those kinds of things, if you don't have a call to action at that point, then all of that work that you went to establish the relationship is going to be wasted. So that call to action is really important. So now I'm going to look at another question. So Amelie says, pharmacies normally do not allow volunteers. No. If you are a pharmacist and you're looking for a way to connect with pharmacies, then, and of course they don't, and accountants don't allow volunteers either. However, there is an association, a professional association of pharmacists, and there are university associations of pharmacists, and the same with accountants and most other professions can volunteer. So if you can go to the association and ask if there's an event coming up, that's an opportunity for you to meet people who could hire you. So it's through the association. You have to find the right place. And the volunteering should be specific to what would be allowed and permissible within that particular industry. So I'm going to give you an example of marketing. And so for marketing, what people often will do is they look for an opportunity where they could do a student internship where they're doing a business plan, marketing plan as a student intern. I know 3 international marketing professionals who, because they did a marketing plan for a business, ends up getting hired afterwards. So that's part of the networking piece as well. So, but for pharmacists, you would need to have a pharmaceutical event that you go to. But there are other events too, and I'm going to talk about that in a minute. It might have nothing to do with pharmacy, but there are other ways that you can network. I'll get there in just a second. So let's assume you're in a networking position right now, and we've just finished this call to action. So you have to remember that that last ask is very important, because if you don't ask, people can't respond with a yes or a no. And if they say no, they don't always mean no. They might mean no right now. So you might ask, could you connect me to somebody else? Or is there somebody you know that I could send my resume to? Remember to stay indirect with this. If you say, may I send you your resume, it may, if you feel you had a really warm interaction, you might be able to ask that. But if you say, do you know someone I could send my resume to? They might say, oh, well, just send it to me. But if you say, may I send my resume to you? They'll say, yeah, okay. Or, you know, they may not even pay attention to it. But if you say, do you know someone who I could send my resume to? Then they'll go, oh, well, you know, why don't you send it to me? And then you say, and do you know anyone you could forward that resume to? You want to keep asking, but not more than 3 asks. After 3 asks, it starts to feel annoying. Okay, so this is it. The networking event is over. And now you have some business cards. You have to follow up. So if you don't follow up, then you've just wasted all your time. It's really helpful if you can follow up within 48 hours. But I have sometimes sent a follow-up that was later than 48 hours and reintroduced myself, and it still worked. But generally speaking, thank you for offering to connect me, or I really enjoyed meeting you, or could we meet for coffee? I'm available on these 2 days if this works at this time. Or the other thing you can do is if you can't think of anything that might work, or you're not sure if the connection was warm enough, then you might go, you just connect with them on LinkedIn. You look at their portrait first, and the reason you want to look at their portrait is because they will get a notification saying, oh, somebody just looked at your portrait. And then they're already warm to you. And after you've done that, then you request to connect with them on LinkedIn. It's best to send a personal connection, but you can send one that's not personal, that's just the standard one on LinkedIn. And then when they connect with you, then you send them a more personal message afterwards. So the follow-up piece is really important because 79% of leads are never followed up. So many people will go to networking events and they never follow up. And so if you do follow up, you are already in a competitive advantage. Okay, let's look at this. Just recap this piece of the webinar for now. So networking is indirect. And you need to stay indirect throughout until you get to the very end when you have an ask. And even your asks should be indirect because actually Canadians are very indirect. They're direct about only things that have to do with information. But when it comes to anything else, forming a personal connection, referring for a job, they're indirect. So you want to stay thinking indirect. Think about the relationship. Think about how you can create value for the other person. You're doing pull, push, pull, push, and pull at the end. Ask probing questions. Respond thoughtfully to whatever they say. Make sure your pitch is clear and interesting and hooks them in. And only talk about yourself when they are ready to listen. Otherwise, it's like falling on deaf ears. You know, it can rain on a rock for a long time, but that rock will not necessarily grow anything. So you want to make sure that your pitch is falling on receptive ears. You want to seal the relationship and ask for the business card when you feel that has happened. And then make a call to action, because if you don't, you will not get that call to action. So now, that is about follow-up. The follow-up is so important. If you don't do the follow-up, then you really haven't gotten anywhere at all. So let's see. Are there any comments or questions so far that you can type into the chat box before I go on to some of the next piece here? Last week, I went to visit a friend of mine who is from Ghana. And then I also had visited another friend who's from Cameroon. So these two friends have had a lot of trouble getting work. And I spent a lot of time asking them what they do when they network. And when they networked, I could tell right away why they weren't getting any results. They were coming on with, here we are, this is what we should do, this is what I want to do, and I'm ready to do this for you, and let's talk. And so that didn't work. And then there were one of them was very indirect with everything that never came to an ask. So there was no ask anywhere in it. So that's also something to think about. So Bernadette's got a comment. She says this is kind of similar to network marketing. However, this is more like building rapport and relationship. Yeah, well, network marketing is based on networking. So learning how to connect with people and create relationship and add value is the whole basis of network marketing. So there you go. Castra said, I'm an introvert. Is there any way to network with people? Yes. In fact, I personally hate networking events. So, and I have to really pump myself up before I go because I'm thinking, oh, this is going to take so much effort and it's just going to be hard. So here's a tip if you're an introvert. Here's something that can be very helpful. When you go into the room, there are two things. If this is a formal networking event, you can go to the food table. Go to the food table, and as you're picking up some food, ask somebody who is next to you, what's good. Ask them if they've tried any of it. And it's not threatening to ask them, oh, what's good on the food table? Have you tried this one before? That's a very nice way, an easy way to get in. Another thing you can do if you're an introvert is look at the room when you come in and look to who's standing alone. Go join that one person who's standing alone. If you join that one person who's standing alone, it's not threatening, but it is threatening to think you have to deal with the whole group of 100 people or more. Now, that's a formal event. We're talking about an informal event, like a lineup. Here is another tip for you. And this I got from a comedian. Now, this is a comedian. You would think, oh, a comedian, what do they know? Now, the comedians are not necessarily extroverts. As soon as they have a microphone, they're good. But in real life, they may be very shy. And so this comedian, what she did was she said, every day I am going to introduce myself to one new person. So wherever she went, wherever she went, she made sure she introduced herself to one new person. She made a comment and found a way to do it. She forced herself to do it. And she has held that rule for herself for 36 years. And she says that's how she ended up getting a lot of good comedy gigs, and she ended up being one of the principal writers for the comedy, long-running comedy TV series called Seinfeld. So give yourself a simple rule that you can follow that involves making yourself speak to one person. It doesn't have to be for very long, just a little introduction or just a little question, and see if you can get them to talk. And that's the other thing. If you're an introvert, it's easy to get the other person to talk. It's harder for you to talk, but getting them to talk is the easy part. So you can go to an event or be somewhere and say, oh, let me see how I can get that person to talk. They're going to think they had a great time because they had a chance to talk about themselves. Okay, Kofi. Kofi said, what if a seemingly fruitful network meeting fails to yield any dividends, especially if the potential employer does not respond to your follow-up? Okay, so Kofi, number one, a networking meeting will never give you a direct job. Remember this, networking is indirect. You network to build a network. You're looking to have a bunch of connections that you can fall back on. Though it is extremely rare for a connection that you make at a networking event to be the job. The connection is just something that leads you to something else. If it didn't yield any results, it's probably because you didn't ask for a connection. So if that person is not interesting or interested for you, you can say, do you know anyone? Or do you have any advice for me? Say, do you have any advice for me? Opens up a whole bunch of doors, okay? Now, statistically, you're going to have to talk to 10 people to get one good connection. And you're going to have to follow up with all those people. Let's say you talk to 10 people. You're going to have to follow up with all of them to get 5 of them to respond. And out of those 5, 2 are going to introduce you to somebody. That's how you get the connection. The connection is going to be your second or third person that you speak to, not the first one. So if you remember that, you're going to be good. But keep that person you first met, keep them in your good books, and think about how you can connect with them later. I know somebody who goes to his LinkedIn list, And, you know, once a month he does all the A's and he just sends them a little hello note saying, hope you're doing well, I'm thinking about you. And then next month he does all the B's on his LinkedIn list, and next week he does all the C's. And, or, you know, he just keeps sending things out and asking people, and a few people respond back, and those few people end up being the ones that he has a connection with that get him work. I also know somebody who does public speaking, and she does the same thing, and that's how she ends up getting her, getting all her gigs, all of them. She gets them from just doing long-term, like 2 or 3 times a year follow-ups. Now you need a job now, right? So this sounds like this is a really not very helpful, but it actually is helpful because you're going to get introductions that you may not have gotten otherwise, because the hidden job market is where most of the 80% of those jobs are in the hidden job market. Now here's another little thing before I answer the next 2 questions. Go to an event that has nothing to do with your profession. For example, I talked to a man a couple of weeks ago who is looking for a management job. He's also a runner, so he went to the running room, and at the running room they had a running group. He joined the running group. One of the people in that running group gave him, he started to talk to that person. That person, you know, ended up giving him an interview, and the interview ended up getting him a part-time job. Okay, so that got him started there. Then he went to another running room event where they had, you know, a whole bunch of people there, and he just chatted with them. And he got another introduction, and this time he got a full-time job. Now, this is because people are not expecting you to talk to them, and if they do, about, you know, work at a running room event. They expect you to talk about running, and you do. But then you end up with a connection that you can use. So going to something that you find what you're interested in, go to whatever you're interested in, and just generally get to know the people there. Ask them a few questions, and then pop the question once you've been through this push-pull thing. Pop the question: do you know anybody who might be able to connect me to some work? You will be surprised at how many great opportunities come out of that. So that's something to keep in mind. Now, Maylee has a question. She said there are not a lot of ADs in the pharmacies field. I asked many pharmacies for a job, but no results. Yes, I know. There could be. It might be that there are no jobs in directly from pharmacies. And in fact, they may not hire you because it may just be that you come and ask for a job. And Canadians are indirect, and when you ask them for a job, they're likely to say no. So you want to try and get in through the back door. Now, I did a webinar a couple of weeks ago on how to get in through that back door. Where is the hidden job market? So you can go onto the Shift website under past webinars, listen to that webinar, and you're going to find out how to get into that back door. I'm not going to go into that totally right now. So let's see, we've got lots of things coming up. Okay, so Maylee wants to know networking. Maylee, I think you should look for things that have to do with interests, specifically things that matter to you that have nothing to do with pharmacy, and see if you can use that indirect method like the running room guy. Okay, so he ended up getting a full-time and a part-time job. Now he has too much work because he just went to the running room because he likes to run. So think about that. Bernadette said, I just want to share, a senior vice president I know has this rule for himself. Get to know something new about someone you know every time you see them. And that's how he earned respect from his people. Even the rank and file employees of the company approach him with no hesitations. Good point, Bernadette. That's really great, because the more be interested in people, not interesting. The more interested you are in other people, the more likely you are to build out your professional network. Like I said, I want to give you as much help as I can. So here's another one. And this is a free article. It's about cross-cultural communication and with more tips on communicating in Canada. You know, when you're in business, you have to get gigs all the time. And you learn to network or you do not make any money. So that is one of my credentials. The other credential is that I help many, many people find work. And I give them 1 or 2 principles, and they start using them, and even if they're skeptical, they get results. So I want to pass that on to you because I know that it's helpful. So now, this is why I think you came to this webinar. I think you wanted some tips so you can get into some good job opportunities. You want to be more confident, be more optimistic. You want to be less worried and stressed about finding work. And you would like to know how to get started or continue your career journey in Canada, or just continue your career journey because you're at a transition point in your life. So I think that's why you came. So I just wanted to let you know that I do have an online course. It's an awesome course. 10,000 people have used it around the world, and it is specifically for finding work in Canada, in your field, getting inside employers' heads, and then dealing with issues that come up so you can get promoted once you do get the job. So everyone who takes the course uses it, and many people continue to use it even after they have found work. And really, I don't think you can afford to miss out on it because it's very helpful. I'm just going to give you a few quick things about it. So one of the things about Work and Culture Online is that you can use LinkedIn to connect professionally, and it gives you some very specific tips. If you aren't using LinkedIn appropriately, you are not going to be able to find work. So this is one of the things you're going to learn. Another thing you learn is, what do employers want? You get inside their brains, and I'll tell you why I know, because of many projects where I have to interview employers and ask them what they're looking for and what frustrations they have with the job applicants. So I have all the inside scoop, and it's Work and Culture Online. And you can avoid mistakes. So you're not going to make a mistake like the little video clip that we showed. So Sumaya said, everything from this course can be applicable to my workplace. And what she is she's a job coach. So she helps people to find work, and she works at Accès Emploi in Alberta. And she said that she has used this, and many people have gotten work from her taking the course because she has new tools to help them with. This lady is my daughter, and she was having trouble finding work. She took my Work and Culture Online course, followed all the principles, and in 2 weeks she got a job. She is now the coordinator of academic integrity at the University of Manitoba. And that was from following the networking principles that I told you about, and a number of other things from Work and Culture Online using the LinkedIn portrait and a few other things. And here's the last one. This is a lady who, she is an accountant. When she was in her interviews, she remembered the video clips and the animations from Work and Culture Online, and she used them, and that's how she got her first job, and she still uses those things to help her solve problems. So I hope you'll be interested. This is my contact information. If you want to speak to me, text me, email me, or send me a tweet, I would be very happy to respond to you. And I do this regularly. It's not going to cost you anything. I will give you a response for sure. You have some burning question, that would be great. I'd be happy to talk to you about it. So that brings us to the end of our webinar. I hope you found this useful, and that you will attend the other webinars, because I think that it's very helpful to give people some hope and some strategies for getting work in their field. And if you had a good time and you found this useful, I am very gratified. That's the whole point. So have a wonderful evening and a wonderful week, and I will see you at the next webinar. Bye-bye, everyone.